This is called a cylinder, bore, block, barrel, depending on what language you speak. The first step in assembly. If the crank installation didn't count, else this is step 2. But why do I have 3 of these? Well, this engine was torn apart to add some power because it didn't have any. While it was still glued together, this block was on it, a replica of the standard size of these perhaps, which means it must be identical to the standard versions of these and perform like them, right? Technically, yes, but in this case, no. Comparing, you would find that the port measurements are same. Inlets, exhaust, even the transfer ports. I've measured across the 3, they are the same. Or you would think so, until you discover this. The port which brings fresh charge into the combustion chamber. You are with me till here, right? Now, let me explain. The air fuel mixture from the carb enters through here, which is then squeezed by the piston's downward stroke. The squeezed mixture, which is now in the crankcase, is pushed from these orifices. That squeezed mixture enters the combustion chamber through here, the transfer ports, which is then compressed from the piston's upward stroke, thus igniting in later stages. So this is what feeds the transfer ports. These both have exactly the same dimensions, and this is smaller than both of these. So I guess this is smaller. If so, can you really call this a replica? Smaller opening might turn into more squeezed fuel mixture, but less volume of it. Will that be the only cause for power loss? I don't know. But since I am rebuilding this engine and my reputation is at stake, I selected the more original of these and sent to a professional. Now this is sleeved to the standard size of 58 millimeters, and as you can see, this fits this block perfectly because it was matched to this block here. But how good of a match is it? Well, let's check the ring gap. My preference is 0.35 to 0.4, which I have filed this because there was no gap. Both are 0.4 millimeters, which is excellent, I hope. The original piston is actually heavier than the replica. So is it better? This image shows that they used 0.5 millimeter base gasket from the factory, and the kit that I have has 0.8 millimeters. I have checked the other one as well. It's 0.8. So I have to use this and hope it works for the squish value I'm looking for. Given the fact that this piston is original, I'm sure it will be better than before. That's if it's installed correctly by me. See this arrow here? That points to the exhaust. Why to the exhaust, not to the intake? Well, you see, the arrow had to be pointed somewhere, and they chose exhaust, not me. Right. Finally, the cylinder has been installed to my liking. At the bottom red center, the transfer ports are fully open. Also, the exhaust port. The head gasket is 0.6 millimeters, which is 1.1 millimeters more than that of factory. Why copper banjo washers on head studs? You see, the cylinder studs are a known area to leak. So I thought to myself, since copper expands when compressed, it should seal the leak if there were any. Sounds brilliant, to me at least. A typical new setup, new piston, new rings and a ring should develop about 125 to 140 psi compression. There are compression gauges to measure that. I would have tested this, but I don't have it. But what I can measure is the squish value. Squish, as the name implies, the gap between the piston at TDC and the head. Since I cannot measure the actual air getting squished, I have to use something that can be measured after being squished. The electrical solder. Idea is to use a 2 mm solder wire, place it between the piston and the cylinder head, either by removing the head or before mounting the head, or through the spark plug hole. Then complete one rotation of the crank so that the piston would have pushed the solder against the head. Then measure the solder diameter, hoping it's near to 1 mm. If it's not, play with different thickness gaskets, base gasket, head gasket to increase or decrease the TDC height with relation to the cylinder. But be sure the piston edge drops below the transfer and exhaust ports when you increase the base gasket thickness. Also make sure this intake is not blocked. Increase the head gasket thickness when the solder you take out is less than 1 mm thick or is squished too much. What I have here is an 18 gauge solder. That means it's less than a millimeter. And now I have something about 2 millimeters. I have got about which is more than 1 millimeter, but I don't have different thickness gasket. I can only double the gasket thickness by adding another, which will make it worse than what correctly is. So I'm going to leave it alone for now.